another one, it flopped. And then
Yeah, it's just...
I did my last one, and the last one honestly isn't on center, but I tried my best. It was
All
like
plots are a little off center.
minuscule. Yeah, you're right.
Alright, so this is probably about 4 pounds of clay. You don't need to use as much clay. It's just sort of what I cut and wedged up. I have some smaller balls. But you know, remember when you're centering, the first thing you want to do is like wedge that clay on the wheel through coning, right? To try and get that under control. And I'm just digging in at the base, trying to get something that my hands can grab onto, and then I can press this clay up and then slowly come up with my hands. Okay, and this is aligning all the clay particles. Once it's up, then I can start to press it back down. And again, I'm just kind of pressing here and pushing in on the side so that as this clay comes out to the side, I'm pushing it back in. I've got my whole body kind of up and over this ball of clay. Water in there, please.
Want me to give you more water?
Sure. Ooh, and I have an air bubble in there that I'm going to pop.
I love when I'm popping the air bubbles. I think it's cool. Doesn't happen really often.
So I'm going to cone this a couple times. This is a bigger piece of clay. It's easier to center. The larger the ball of clay, easier to center if you're doing this coning, because what I'm doing is I'm grabbing what fits between my hands.
Yeah.
And when it's a big ball of clay, I can't get my hands, I can't get the kind of power that I want, that I can with a smaller piece of clay. So here I am just kind of, and you can see that it's starting to be a bit more under control here, and a bit more uniform. And I'm really kind of pushing and pulling like this. So clean up this edge.
I still just have to get used to that push and
Yeah.
pull kind of thing. I think I'm getting there.
We're getting there, and it just takes practice, you know. When you watch me throw, you're watching like decades of remembrance, right? Decades of muscle memory. Alright, so push this back down. And once I do get it into this kind of more manageable shape and size, then I can really come and I can compress from the top and the side. And try and get this on center. So with a cylinder, which is what we're making a cup shape, we start with a centered ball of clay that is taller than is wide. With a flared form, we're going to start with something that's lower and wider than it is tall. Sort of a half of a grapefruit shape is a really good kind of descriptor. A couple of air bubbles that I just totally wedged in there. So I'm pushing this sort of lower and wider.
Okay.
Because when you are making a bowl, the cross section is going to be different. It's going to be a slope and a swoop, and you're going to need more clay on the outside to support that cantilever.
Right.
So we're not going to be able to be as efficient as we are with cylinder shapes. I also like to kind of push in and make it into my grapefruit shape, almost into a big doorknob shape. Because that means I'm going to be able to get my hands in off the bat, rather than pushing in and pushing clay up into a bump on the inside. So I've got my doorknob shape, I'm centered, and then I'm just going to cradle my hands around this shape just like I would if I were opening a cylinder, and I'm going to slowly open the ball of this clay. Now with these next bowls, I want you to leave a little bit more clay in the bottom, because we're going to flip them over and we're going to start to learn how to trim them. And so we want to leave now make our floor about 1/2 inch thick instead of 1/4 inch thick, because we'll trim out 1/4 inch. Okay? So that will take a little bit of adjusting. So I'm just opening this up, a little bit of a pond in there, opening this up, and I'm going to stop this so I can measure. Okay, all the way down. There I am. I'm a little bit bigger. I've got about 3/4 of an inch, so I know that I can get in a little bit more as I open this up. So what's different about opening for a bowl is that with a floor, we push it out, we work the floor, established
And
our
maybe
corners
pull
and pull
up.
them up. Here, we're going to move your hand on a 45-degree angle, and we're going to make the shape of an inside of a bowl. And that's how we do that. So first, I'm going to open it up by just walking my fingers across. And it starts, with a floor.
Yeah.
Okay? But I need to, at a certain point, just start swooping my fingers, allow them to come up on a 45-degree angle. I'm going to carefully release and grab this top bump of clay, and I'm just incorporating that. So I'm compressing on either side, and I'm trying to incorporate this back into my shape. And so you can see that interior that is, I'm starting to work the shape. And so that's the piece that we still have to do, is we still have to open the ball, and we have to work this curve. We have to work the curve before we start pulling.
Right.
So we're doing the same thing, but we're setting up a different shape. So instead of having that, flat floor, vertical walls, we are just setting up a curve. And I'm using my sponge with my fingers pressed in, so then I have this wide space. And I'm just slowly using that wide expanse of the sponge with the pressure of my fingers to open up this shape. And again, I'm not making any pulls, I'm just stretching this ball open. And again, if you don't set this up, it's hard to go back and do it later. So I'm doing that here. I've done some stretching. I'm going to come back and compress this here. This is where this rib comes in really nice, because you can grab it in a little hole. It's very, very flexible, and so I kind of bend it when I go in on an angle. And I'm not pressing the whole thing. I'm just I'm bending it and just getting it on the one side. And I'm going to use this to creep up the side and just use the rib to take that shape and give it some nice compression, just like you would do on the floor with the square edged rib. This is the same thing, but we're using the curve to establish a really nice curve and compress this clay. It's really important to compress this clay because, again, we're going to have more of it down at the bottom, and we want to pay some attention. Sometimes you grab the other side. And we want to just pay attention and really compress, and establish that curve. Okay? Once you've established your curve and opened this ball and compressed, then I can come and I can compress that rim again. Now you can see why I pushed in on the side here, because I can get my fingers under here and grab all of this clay. Now we are definitely going to leave this as a wedge. If you dig in too much and you pinch too much right here, this is going to become too heavy and it will flop over. So I'm going to come and start on my other side. I'm always going to start with my fingers in the center, and I'm going to walk them out. Just another layer of compression. As soon as my fingers get in this relationship where I can lift from the outside and bottom, I will start to use some pressure. I'm really kind of just evening out on this first pull. And I also am finding that there's an air bubble in there. It's bouncing around. And I'm curving, and then I'm coming up. Okay? So it's a curved bottom, and then I'm coming vertically. And that is so that if we just kept pulling out and out and out, every time we put water into this, it becomes weaker, and it's just going to want to flop down and over. If we come around and up, and then stretch it out, the clay will remember coming up first, and so when it shrinks and it dries, it is, even if you have something that's really flared out, it's more apt to shrink up this way as opposed to warp down that way. Be careful of how much water ends up in that bowl form. So now I'm pretty even. I've compressed my rim. I'm going to start again, and I'm going to just try and get at some of this clay. And vertically up. I'll pop that air bubble in a minute. I wedged that right in. Did a nice job. Okay, I'm coming up and compressing my rim. So it's a taper. It's going to look like a wedge if we cut this in half. But I also don't want to make this so thin right now because I know I have to stretch it out. If I make it a quarter of an inch thick here, when I stretch it, it's going to become even thinner and really wobbly. You can see that I have a lot of clay on here. So I'm going to again start in the center, walk my fingers out, get clay all over my computer down there. wheel head up a little bit. I'm going to grab this clay. And then I'm really lifting from the up from the bottom to bring this clay up and in. As I get up a little bit further, I'm easing my pressure. I'll carefully release right before the rim, compress my rim. I'm going to go down and make another pull and really try and get, I like the thickness up here, but I really want to try and get some more clay out of this bottom. And so now I'll do that by pushing in, down on the inside, whereas on the cylinder, we are usually pushing out to grab that clay. It's a little bit of a role reversal here with the power of your hands. The outside really becomes kind of the power hand here. So I'm going to grab this clay, dig in, grab that bump, and bring this up. And you can see that as I'm coming up, I am starting to kind of stretch it out a little bit because clay doesn't want to do all of it stretching all at once. I'm going to stop the wheel for just a second, see if I can, aha, there's my nice big air bubble. Pop it, two of them. Turn that back on. Get the water out of the bottom of my bowl, come back, do a little bit more compressing down there. Compress my rim. I'm going to take this rib, and again on the inside, just start at the bottom and slowly bring my rib up, compressing out that air bubble, also giving me a nice kind of clean shape in there. So again, the rib is really going to be a tool that you can use to make pulls with, but also to stretch and to shape with. I really like this, the Mud Tools rib on the inside, as well as the outside. I will often lean on a metal rib on the outside for taking shape. So I am starting to shape my rim, right? So before I start stretching, I really want to make sure that I have a shape that I'm working with, as opposed to then trying to set the shape once it's already stretched out. So I'm going to grab this and get a little bit more moisture on the inside that I just took out. And I'm going to start, I'm making a pull at the bottom, but I'm starting to stretch it as I go. So I'm kind of stretching and pulling, and as I come up the side of this bowl, I'm releasing my pressure between my hands and just allowing my fingers to stretch. So I'm just kind of pushing. So on the outside, my hand is lifting here, and on the inside, my hand is kind of pushing out. Come back and compress this rim. And before I get into really doing my final pushing and stretching, I always come at the excess here, and I'm going to just trim some of this away. So that I do that trimming now, as opposed to after I've stretched it, because it can again push, when I'm pushing in, it's pushing up a bump on the inside of the bowl. And I will use this tool to just kind of hang out here and compress it a little bit, because it, we're not really able to get down there with our fingers, and so that will help reduce cracking later. So I'm going to go with my rib again. I'm going to compress that floor and just hang out in the center for several rotations. I like my sponge on the outside to be the supporting player here. And I'm going to start to push and stretch this bowl out. You can see it kind of resisting the stretch and that kind of wiggle it was doing. And just a little stretch has really thinned out my rim. It's made this a much more generous sized shape. And I kind of compress my rim. This is really important when you're stretching bowls out, because you're taking that clay and you're stretching those particles apart, and you need to push them back together so they don't crack. So I've got a pretty nice stretch there. If you want something that's harder, you can switch your rib. I'm going to go ahead and do another little stretch. And this is just a concave, simple curve bowl, right? I could make this a double curve bowl by pushing in and making a double curve. We could push in here and flare the rim out so we can have compound shapes. Again, I'm going to compress that rim. I am going to, because we've done all that stretching on our rim and our outside, we do want to compress the outside of this shape. So I am going to take the metal rib and come down and again curve it so that it gets the curve, and sponge on the inside. And I'm just going to push this bowl a little bit out into this, and it's going to take the slip off, which is going to make it easier to pick up, right? And it is going to compress that surface so that it's nice and tight and not going to crack. So I'm just pushing it a little bit there to make a little bit of a little tiny swoop right before, and I'm just pushing in with the back. I'm going to compress my rim, and I'm going to come back, and the last thing I'm always going to do is touch the form on the inside to make it swell and have breadth. And so this isn't so much of a shaping opportunity as it is just kind of a clean up and a very light breath of attitude. It's getting a little bit, again, of that slip off, and then I can come and clean up my rim. Now this sponge that I'm using was kind of rough and gnarly, and it's giving me a kind of a rough and gnarly sponge-like texture that I'm not loving. So a simple trick is to take a little piece of plastic. The thinner the plastic, the better. Fold it over. Get it wet in your split bucket, and take that folded edge and compress it over the side. You guys see the difference of that? It's a really simple, cheap way to make a really nice edge. The trick is to then not lose your plastic in your water bucket for your reclaim. So here I have now this really nice compressed curve. It doesn't have that texture of the sponge, which I don't really love. I'm just cleaning it up there. A little bit of slip. You can peek down at the side. I think I want this to just stretch a little bit more. I want it to have a little bit more generous curve right there. I'm just peeking at the profile. You don't want to spend your life leaning to the side. Bring in a mirror to rest in front of your wheel, right about here, and it will reflect back. You can look in the mirror as you're throwing, and you'll do less body contorting. Alright, and so here is just sort of a really generous kind of bowl or square form. Alright, questions?
Not right now.
Okay, so that's, I just want you to start here. Again, 2 to 3 pounds of clay. This is more than that. 2 to 3 pounds of clay. If you start to feel really comfortable with 2 pounds of clay, give yourself some more clay to challenge yourself. You start low and wide, 3/4 or 1/2 inch thickness in the base, because we're going to learn to trim these. And so from about sort of here up, your wall thickness should be that 1/4 inch. And it will really, it will taper. Okay? Questions?
Maybe while you're...
Okay, while you're working, that's fine. So let's use this time for some work time, and I'd love to see, gosh, today's Monday. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so for Wednesday, let's try to have 3 of these. Okay, 3 board ones.
I'm pretty sure I'll be back during the day tomorrow.
Okay.
If I don't